the interest of time. The stragglers will just have to catch up. Welcome, everyone. Good to have a good number on today's call. Clearly, it's a topic that's been pretty active on the WhatsApp chat. So today, it's a broad topic, recruitment and retention. There's a lot in that, and I have no doubt there'll be lots of questions, and hopefully we can provide some answers. I know there'll be some good discussion. Really, this comes down to there is not a solution that's going to fit everyone's business entirely. I think today is sort of understanding what the options are, things to consider, how things are changing as well. I think all of these things are, and some of this will come out, I'm sure, in the questions that come through. Effectively, there are two different scenarios when you're looking at staffing, employed versus self-employed. I will talk a little bit about the employed side of things secondly, but initially I want to introduce you to Penny Davis. Penny and I have worked together for 17 years.
A bit longer, I think.
It's a long time. So,
yeah.
So Penny started out as a practice manager at Pure Sports Medicine and was on board before I joined. And then Penny transitioned into a professional HR role. So we supported her through an MSc, and Penny really helped set up and structure our HR function in the business. And actually now she has moved on to become a lecturer. So she's lecturing at the University of Lancaster. She's done doing a PhD, and she is working one day for us now as an organisational consultant. So one of the reason I asked Penny to come and present today was as part of her PhD, she's done some really interesting research on self-employed physiotherapy. And so I thought, given the context of what we're talking about, there's going to be some really useful stuff in it to share with you all. So Penny, I'm going to hand over to you to run through, kick things off from a self-employed perspective.
Cool, thank you. Right, let me just start by sharing my screen. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that. Shout out if you can't see it. So as Simon says, I'm a lecturer at the University of Central Lancashire, and I'm doing a PhD for the Institute of Research Organisations, Work and Employment. And my research is on the experiences of self-employed private practice physiotherapists. And I wanted to understand how self-employment affects the work of private physios, and really how this frames their understanding and attitude to their work and to their careers. So the work's still ongoing. I'm analysing and writing up my findings now. But the fieldwork took place between October 2022 and February 2023. There's a bit of feedback, Simon. Is somebody's mic on? I'll carry on. The fieldwork took place between October 2022, February 2023 across England, Scotland and Wales. And the research was using qualitative approach, using 59 in-depth semi-structured video interviews. And during the study, I interviewed 43 private self-employed physios, 5 industry experts, 4 business owners, 4 employed NHS physios and 3 employed private physios. And I set out just to interview self-employed physios and experts and business owners. And then during that, I wanted to test some of my themes and concepts by then checking what was happening in the NHS and checking what was happening in private employed practice. So I could have discussed lots of different things today, but Simon wanted to talk about this idea of recruitment and retention. So we thought we'd look at why physios became self-employed in the first place. So the top 3 reasons were freedom over their own work and having that clinical autonomy, which was really high. Negative experiences of employed roles in the NHS and private practice also drove people to want to become self-employed. And thirdly, people were desiring a better work-life balance. Now, whether they got that is another story, which I'll touch on in a moment. And then the other 3 weren't as high, but they still were important for some, was the desire to be their own boss and wanting to open their own clinics. Some thought they could earn more money. And again, whether that was possible or not was different for many participants, and some it was lack of choice. They didn't actually want to become self-employed, but there were no other options, and so they had to be. So I'm now going to look at each of those different elements in turn, or the main ones, and I really want the participants to do the talking and have the impact, really. So I've picked out a few key bits of raw data that these are my participants' own words. So this one is a physio talking about NHS employment, and it was quite a harrowing story, and it happened actually the day before the interview. And so he was talking about a patient that came in that was a prisoner, and he had 15 minutes to see this appointment. And again, it was, dissatisfaction about seeing 20 patients a day for 15 minutes each. And he told me this quite harrowing story. And it was really, not only was it harrowing, but there was a lack of support. So he said, talking about the patient, he smuggled a razor blade in his pocket and then just started hacking at his throat during the physio appointment. Now, luckily, he was handcuffed with one hand to one prison officer, and the other prison officer managed to grab the blade. That was a pretty traumatic experience for me, and so that's definitely going to stay with me for a good long while. I'm pretty pissed off with the fact that I've not had any support from the NHS about it. All the alarms are going off. The police were called, but after an hour of everything was sorted out, I just had to carry on with the clinic. I've not had a manager or a senior member of staff come to talk to me about how I'm feeling. So obviously that's quite extreme, but there was lots and lots of other events people were recalling about stress and their workload and having adequate support. Another issue with the NHS was bureaucratic management practices, and this was from a participant who had worked in the NHS and then left and became self-employed and ran her own practice, and she talks about the final straw. So when I went for an interview, I got 1 point less than the girl who got the job, even though I'd been working for the trust for a couple of years. I'd set up loads of initiatives. I've been doing loads of things. She was significantly more junior to me relative to that trust and everything, but she had 1 more point. So she got the job, and I was like, what a load of shit. And I was like, if this is how you're going to treat me, then I'm out of here. And again, there were countless stories about bureaucratic management really not valuing these individuals and them going, right, I'm getting out. But it wasn't just dissatisfaction with NHS employment. There were lots of stories about dissatisfaction with being employed in the private sector. So I've got 3 on the screen here. So I've got somebody talking about their long days. So they'd say, we'd have long days where you have to finish at 8 and get back home by 9 and then start the next day at 7:30. I mean, you have to also realise that people are human. We can't be switched on from 7:30 in the morning to whatever else time. So again, it's just shifts, and lack of control really was a big issue. Then the other participant in quote 2, if you go into the big bad world of private practice, excuse my language, it's fucking scary. I used to work pretty much 8 till 6 or 8 till 7 every single day. It was exhausting. It was just working full on and taking half an hour for lunch, and before you know it, you're divorced. Now, this is about schedules and feeling there's a lack of control. Now, definitely when I looked at the data, there were cases where people worked even harder in self-employment and worked even longer hours, but there was something about them having the control and them being able to make that choice. So it was very much, they might work harder now and they might be even more exhausted now, but it's their choice and they're not having to answer to somebody else. So that was a key theme. And then the final quote at the bottom, just trying to move my little window. There we go. We used to joke about that feeling at the end of the week when you just had no more care left to give. You had the time in your diary, you were there in physical presence, but you just didn't have enough care left to give out. And that sort of became a joke, like, oh, don't book in with me on a Friday because I'm just not going to be able to emotionally give out as much as I could on Tuesday. And it was genuinely a problem. We joke about it because we were trying to understand it, but it was definitely a problem. So again, just this workload and how that impacts you as a clinician, really. So a lot of these participants felt that self-employment was a solution, and it was a solution in some ways, but it brought with it its own set of challenges. So participants were here we're talking about, I sort of think I've had enough of being employed, being told when I can do things, when I can't do things. I would have never thought that I'd be that self-employed person, but it's a lot more liberating. It's not a simple life, but it's much better. And in fact, in many people's cases, it definitely wasn't a simple life and it was incredibly stressful. But again, it's this idea that they're in control of it and it's their choice made that okay for them, or they could justify some of the grueling experiences that they had. And then this came up a lot for parents, was I wanted to be there for sports days and plays. And it was this idea that I don't now have to get permission to go to a play or go to an assembly. I'm in control of my workload. So that was really important. And then the challenges. So self-employment was definitely not without its challenges, and there were significant challenges. The first one was financial instability and this lack of security from not having a steady income, which was a significant stressor. Also long hours and work intensification, which you could see in the employed model as well, but it was more so, and there was nobody sort of gatekeeping that, and obviously there was no working times regs protecting people. Prioritising work over family, again, could be seen in employment, but again, this really, really long work hours culture sort of forced a significant prioritisation of work over family. And then emotional burden, which again could be seen in employed, but it was definitely present in self-employed because of all these factors which stacked together. So the reality for these participants was some quote, and again, I've got loads of different quotes, but I've just picked 3 of them. So the top one, number 1 is the pressure of actually earning. That's huge. And it is an incredibly powerful worry to have. You know, it's something that can be quite crippling. It can be very stressful. And again, it's not easy to manage if you're not earning the money you need. And that, I think, is one of the hugest things that probably most self-employed people will worry about. And I had people talking about, I still can't get a mortgage because I don't have the paperwork and I'm not earning enough. And people also talking about, I'd like to have children, but my income is unsteady and I just don't think I can do that. So these are really difficult challenges people are facing. And then the working hours one from the middle quote, I'm probably doing 80 to 90 hours a week. I'm exhausted. And the participant was crying when he said that. And then the last one, people could call me, text me, whatever, any hour of the day. And I've had 2 compassionate burnouts, which as a therapist isn't ideal. Now, the fact that this is linked to being a therapist and the self-employed model, you're driving your own income, you don't want to lose patients, you want to be accessible all hours of the day. Whereas in employment, you've normally got receptionists as gatekeepers, or you're not the business owner, you don't feel that responsibility, so you can switch off. There was this lack of ability for a lot of participants to be able to switch off, which was huge. So no doubt it's got its huge challenges being self-employed, and the current situation most industries are facing, not physiotherapy alone, but a lot of industries, is that recruitment and retention is really, really tough. But I've got a slide on the screen at the moment, which is from the CIPD. It's their Good Work Index from 2022. And it just highlights 7 different dimensions that make up good quality work and good quality jobs. And so it's, even though it's challenging, I still think there's opportunities to do things differently. And, we faced some challenges in terms of COVID. We had the Great Resignation. We've then had the Great Exhaustion. And I think a lot of this has really changed people's concept of the idea of work. And we can see a real rejection in traditional notions of career, and people being happy to dedicate a lot of their working lives to career. So I think there's opportunities, challenges certainly, but opportunities as well for an employed model. Back to you, Simon.
Thank you, Penny. Obviously some very sobering quotes there from physiotherapists, and I can't help but reflect on something I heard this week in the news, and again it goes to the point that it's not our sector alone that is immune to the challenges of recruitment. So the housing sector, we're behind the number of houses we need to build in the United Kingdom, and I was blown away by the fact that bricklayers can earn £50,000, and I thought, wow, £50,000, a bricklayer. Obviously, they get a certification. And we've got physiotherapists who are university educated, delivering amazing care to patients on a daily basis. And they've got to work incredibly hard to get anywhere near 50,000 in a lot of areas. And that, comes back to the point of, I guess, are we valuing our services? That's just a thought that was buzzing around in my head earlier this week. But in terms of the self-employment side of things, I mean, before I go on and talk a bit about the employed side of things, it'd be good to stop and just pick up any questions that are bubbling around in people's minds now. We obviously will have time at the end, but if there's anything people wanted to ask Penny right now, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will talk a bit more about the employed side of things, and then we can round off with questions. But open to take any questions now. Hal got a few. That's good. Helen.
Penny, that's really, really interesting. I've not ever heard of anyone ever doing work like that before. I mean, this is a great forum to share it in, right? Have you shared it in other fields of physio?
Yeah, I mean, I've shared it at work sociology conferences, but I wrote an article recently for Physio First, so it was in their article, and I went to a volunteer day recently with them, and they had some members. So yeah, sharing it with actual physiotherapists is sort of new for me.
And what about like CSP, for example?
Yeah, the CSP were there. I've had conversations with the CSP. They took part in the research, actually, and they've got a copy of the article. And I saw a senior member of the CSP recently. We discussed it. So we're going to keep dialogue open. And obviously part of the PhD is having an impact and making a contribution. So yeah, I want to continue to have that dialogue with the CSP.
Is there an article you can share with us?
Yeah, I can do. Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
yeah,
that'd be great.
I'll send it to Simon. He'll circulate it.
Thank you.
And if you want to get in touch, particularly about the CSP and some of the key messages you want back, then please do so.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Rachel.
Hi, thanks for that again, really super interesting. One question I just had was on the participants that you had who were self-employed. Were they all self-employed within their own clinics, or were they self-employed within larger clinics?
They were both. Yeah, okay. Some of them were like one-man bands. Yeah. Some of them had their own clinics and had other associates working for them. Some of them were associates working with other people. Some were doing a bit of both. And I've obviously got all that data, but there was a right mixed bag of experiences. And yes, some of them had specific challenges and issues because of whatever, work situation they were in.
Mm-hmm. I guess that was my sort of follow-up question, is what were the differences between the people who, we as a clinic owner, we employ all of our staff probably for the last 12 years, but we had previously had self-employed. It didn't work for us as a business, but sometimes I go back and forth on would it help recruit more? Would it help with that? So I guess that's my,
Yeah.
Sense in terms of, but just in terms of like, there's a difference between being self-employed and running your own clinic and running your own business, and being self-employed within somebody else's clinic. I guess I'm interested in differences in those.
Yeah, so I guess it was a bit of a stepping stone if people went out of employment and then moved maybe to self-employed as an associate for somebody. It was like the first step, building confidence, testing it, still being within a clinic, not being responsible for the building, etc. So it was like a comfort blanket in a way, but there were other issues, like they still didn't have full control that they wanted because they were in the confines of a clinic. Maybe they couldn't, and this is usual, maybe they couldn't dictate the length of appointment that were on offer because the clinic only did certain appointment lengths, and they probably couldn't dictate price, and maybe the clinic owners also dictated other things. So there was like it was like a middle ground between employment and running your own show. So there was like some issues of control there and not having full autonomy, and then sometimes some pressure to do things that people were like, I don't really want to do that, but equally I'm sort of trapped in this situation. And then obviously people that ran their own shows much more sort of the financial pressure and much more like not having any gatekeepers to sort of protect them from patients. So like the burnout, the workload, and the work intensity was greater with those people.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we move on to talk a bit more about, I guess, employed side of things?
Do you want me to stop sharing, Simon?
Actually, you can leave that slide up, Penny. Actually, I think it's a good thing to reflect on, because I think actually the 7 elements of good practice are relevant to employed and self-employed. And I guess the reality is that, you know, all of our collective organisations probably have we have a mix of employed versus self-employed. Some lead with employed and some lead with self-employed. I guess my reflections and experience over the years are changing. They're changing because people's attitudes to work are changing. At Pure Sports Medicine, we've always led with an employed model. And I guess some of the reasons around why I believe an employed model is highly effective is you clearly get all of someone's time. And when you're looking to cover, 5 days a week in a clinic, having a bunch of full-time people certainly helps with that. But the biggest reason for going down the employed route is that we have found, and I have found personally, that you get more buy-in from employees. You can ask more of an employee. Now, equally, there's got to be return on that. So what does the employee get for that commitment to you? And there's no doubt, financial security has got to be a big one. And as Penny pointed out there, financial security is one of the worries for those that become self-employed. So I think, financial security and the other benefits that come with employment, contribution to a pension scheme, you may be able to offer private medical insurance and other related benefits. And so, those things are all can be seen incredibly positively by some people. And in terms of what you get out of them, you get a lot more. It's not without its challenges, of course, because I'm sure everyone is familiar and has had a number of staff come to them and talk about wanting more flexibility. And it's a term that pops up time and time again. And we talk about it, we reflect on it. I guess the reality is that there are parts of our collective businesses that are rigid. Unfortunately, we have to be there to see patients, and patients are dictating the timetables and the clinic structure. So unfortunately, it means that you can't just rock in and rock out when you want to, because you need to be there to see the patient. So, I bet that's the bit that we have, I guess, struggled with over the years, is that there is an element of inflexibility to the care models that we provide. But understanding what flexibility means for individuals, and this changes across the age demographic. And again, I think it's probably a point of reflection for each of you to think about, where your clinics are at in terms of that demographic. Certainly flexibility for someone in their mid-20s is going to be very different to someone in their mid-40s. And understanding those needs and demands is really important, and what you can do around it. Practical things like, as Penny said, someone might want to go and see their sports day at their kid's school. Well, you can do that as an employee. It's an understanding with your employer. You can swap shifts with someone, you can make up the time. But I guess it's that cultural understanding that is it's the norm, it's accepted, it's a thing you can do. Again, these are things that I think are all within our control. And again, giving people autonomy over their diaries to a degree. It's a case of, you can put breaks in if you're incredibly busy, and it depends how rigid you want to be. I would suggest that, over the years, we have learnt that we've had to become more flexible. We've been too rigid, and we've had to change how we operate to accommodate changing demands of employees. And I think it's something that has gathered real pace, I think, as Penny pointed out, since the pandemic. What people are looking for out of a working relationship, out of an employed relationship, and out of a career has changed dramatically. I guess I guess where we've landed and is that actually both models work and can work incredibly effectively in a clinic environment. So, you know, we certainly rely on employees to sort of fill the bulk of our clinical availability. But for us to get sufficient room utilization, we certainly rely on self-employed people to help fill those gaps. So I'm talking about, you know, someone willing to commit 10 to 15 hours a week. And we've got a number of self-employed staff who have worked for us for over 10 years. And they've obviously found a balance. They might be doing some lecturing, you know, they do some private work, they might do some professional sports stuff, whatever it is, they've found a balance that works for them. And that's why at the beginning I said there's not really a one size fits all scenario. I think, you know, as I said, a mix can work and a fully employed model can work and a self-employed model can work. It kind of depends. And I guess the other thing that has been really topical is, you know, obviously everyone's working incredibly hard to recruit staff, whether that be employed or self-employed. And once you get them, obviously trying to retain them is the other key thing. That's probably, I mean, I didn't want to, you know, I just wanted to cover over some of the key themes and some of my own personal experiences and our experiences with those employment models. But I'm really interested to field some more questions from the floor because, as I said, it's quite individual to your circumstances. So hopefully a few of you have got some questions and queries which will generate some good conversation. So open up the floor to questions. Rachel, I still have your hand up. Was that from the first? Let's come down.
So I just had an observation, if that's all right.
Absolutely, Tash.
So, I mean, like you, we have a mixture of self-employed and employed. And do most people on this call have the same? Yeah. And maybe you find that I certainly find the self-employeds, and that might fit with your survey as well, are 90% busy, and the employed staff, it's a struggle to get them beyond 75 to 80% busy sometimes. So, and the other thing about being able to offer, so that's an interesting thing to think about, but also being able to offer the more sort of eminently qualified older physios a higher salary tends to be the self-employed route, because they can have the flexibility and earn more. But you know, unfortunately, the physios, we don't charge enough. As Simon said, if a builder's earning more than us or a bricklayer, it's not really right. So it's up to us to try and change that as well as a group.
Thanks, Tash. Rachel, you got your hand up?
Yeah, hiya. Sorry, I did have my hand up from before as well. So yeah, I guess I'm curious about your mix, Simon. I think that's what I sort of maybe alluded to before, is that we employ all our staff, but we definitely, with some of our staff who are part-time, so those maybe who work 15 hours or so for us, there's starting to become sort of talk of them potentially being able to earn more money going and teaching Pilates classes on a self-employed basis, or being able to do something rather than being on the employed route. And that's something that I've been thinking about. So how do you work it for those guys that are self-employed in terms of percentage commission per patient, and how does that not cause questions by the employed people? I guess, you know, part of me wonders if by having some in one bucket and some in the other, will the employed people go, oh, well, hold on, maybe I can earn more money? And I always have this conversation with employed staff about that. It may seem that the self-employed people are earning more money, but actually when you take out your pension and your holiday pay and your, you know, all the other things at the end of the day, you kind of have to work it out, and they probably aren't earning more money, but they look like they get more money in their hand. So yeah, I'm just curious as to how you work that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Rachel. I mean, our broad split, we have about 60% employed, 40% self-employed. And the reality with us is that you can earn the same amount of money being self-employed versus employed, to keep it really consistent. So again, it's based on a percentage of revenue, but there's an element of, as an employee, there's obviously an element of a fixed salary to provide that financial security. I mean, again, it's a case of trying to demonstrate and provide visibility about what the two different models offer. I mean, as we know, if you're self-employed, you know, you've got to cover your own annual, you know, when you've got holidays, you've got to cover your own pay for that. There's no sick leave allowance, all of those things. So, you know, your take-home pay is going to be, you know, a good number, but you've got to service quite a few different things with that. So just giving them visibility of what the two different models offer, and breaking it down and making sure they understand what they get, what they don't get, I think is absolutely critical. And people will work out what is best for them. And we've other things that we've had to do over time is become more flexible. So there was a time when we would, if to be an employee, you had to work 5 days a week. Now that's no longer the case. So you can be an employee on, you know, working 4 days a week. And we've got people that have, you know, they've gone on maternity leave and come back as employees on 3 days a week. So again, being able to provide some flexibility within your models, I think helps. And just making sure people have got all the information to make an informed choice also helps. And I would say part of that visibility is showing that actually they're no better off under being an employee versus self-employed. It's just you've got, under one scenario, you get a lot more support. The other scenario, you've got to support yourself.
And probably even just, if I can, just to follow up from that, that's totally gone from my head now. No, I'm gonna have to.
I was going to say, Rachel, that with the employees who are not self-employed don't mind. They're employed for a reason. They want that stability. They want that flexibility. They want to feel, you know, safe. I would actually disagree with Simon. I think self-employed people do earn more, significantly more. But depending on the percentage, I know someone's asked that question, but you know, it depends on them as well. If they want to take 5 weeks holiday a year still and be self-employed, they will earn more money, and that is a way to keep them sort of happier with their lot, as it were, because we can't afford to pay them as high as we'd like to.
Yeah, I remembered my question, and that was on because Amy and I have been having a chat during this week about bonus structures as well for employed staff. So I'd be curious as to know if anybody else does that, where they get paid a base salary and then after 6 months commission on top of that, if anybody else does that and how that's structured. Because again, that's another model that I think is quite interesting, that gives them a level of security, but also gives them the chance of earning more if they're busier. And does it incentivize those employed people to keep themselves busier? As you had said, we always see that self-employed people will keep themselves busy. Employed people, not the right people, will not necessarily keep themselves busy. So just curious of people's thoughts on that as well.
Thanks, Rachel. Lucy, I'll bring you in.
Yeah, no, I wanted to speak to a couple of questions that people have put up about standard rate for self-employed. And all I can say is the experience of our company. So we run a bit of a hairdressing model. So we have consultant physiotherapists. Some are employed and some are self-employed. They receive much more money than per patient. They're sold out at much more money per client. So, for example, a new patient for physiotherapy for a consultant will range between 130 and 160, 70 pounds. And the physios who are self-employed at the consultant level receive between 55 to 75% of that. Now, sorry, 70%, which is an awful lot, but the ones who actually receive 70%, there's only a couple, and that's a very specialist neurology. They tend to do all of their admin. The admin doesn't go through the clinic. They do all of the feedback. They communicate with the parents. It's very labor intensive because all of the kids have cerebral palsy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot that they do in the background there for that very high percentage. And also, I think when we started that, literally we said, look, we have no idea how to market and recruit patients for a pediatric neurology physiotherapist. And he said, the team said basically, well, we'll do all that. We'll do all that. So that kind of denoted a higher level. All of the rest of the consultants are on 55% of what they make, which again is a good whack. And they can make an awful lot of money, probably make somewhere between 70, 80, 90,000 a year. The more junior physios who are self-employed are not on a percentage basis. They are on a cost per case basis. So they receive, I think it's something like, I want to say for half an hour, I think it's about £28 or something like that. I can't remember, but essentially it's about 50 quid an hour. And the reason we do that is because of the influence of the PMIs. I think in 2008, Bupa paid us 50 quid and we charge 50 quid. Now Bupa pay us 53 and we charge 85. So we didn't want to have a complex system where the patients were penalised if they came through the PMI route. And rather than, the physio invoicing us so much because they'd seen 20 AXAs and 50 self-payers. So we do have a stepwise amount because of that. And it's all very transparent. Everybody's very clear about it. People are given the option of being employed or self-employed. We have about 60% self-employed. The reason for that is largely because most of our clients are out with squads or aligned to squads, most of our team. So they're often disappearing off. And then our employed physios who want to do that, we have in everybody's contract that they're able to take accumulated hours or unpaid leave or blah, blah, blah. So, for example, one of the guys is out with British Rowing next week, and that's a new venture for him, which we're keen to support. He's employed. So he's taking unpaid leave for that because he likes to travel quite a lot. So we're totally flexible whether people are employed or self-employed.
Thank you, Lucy. Yeah, I think that's a great example of there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all scenario for businesses. Thanks, Lucy. Eric, I'll bring you in now.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, everybody. It's really interesting to hear these different sort of scenarios there, because 15 years ago when I started, it was all about having self-employed people because that was less risk for me. I struggled through the early teen years to find anybody to apply for jobs. Everybody wanted employed. And so it's for the last 10 years, everybody's been all employed. And it's only been in the last year. So we've actually had quite a number of people applying for jobs in the last 9 or 12 months, with a mix of people now again looking for self-employed, which I've kind of moved away from completely. So yeah, that's just an observation to sort of hear how it's going. But as for Rachel's question, we've got a bonus structure that we use with the bonus will make up between 10 and 30% of a salary for somebody on an employed model, sort of earnings above a certain threshold, which for us takes away the question of how much is this patient, but it is an incentive to keep people busy. Yeah, I think the other comment really is just the control autonomy question is really vital to this. For me, it's much harder to fill somebody who only does 1 day a week than it is somebody who's doing 3 or 4 days a week. I find that really counterintuitive to the people coming part-time on top of, say, an NHS role. But once they're busy, then yeah, they're super busy and their incomes are topped up quite comfortably. But yeah, the important conversation I have with them from the outset is that idea of openness and flexibility, and we don't miss the kids' birthday parties and we don't miss the school assemblies and things like that. Yes, these are your hours. Yes, the control of wanting them is there, but we're open and reasonable people, hopefully.
Thanks, Eric. I'm not sure who it is, but it's Back and Body's got their hand up.
Hi there. Sorry. Yeah, it's Rich Evans here. How you doing?
Hey, Rich,
Thanks for this, guys. Really, all really interesting stuff. Just a couple of points from me. Just one point towards the IR35 rules, and just whether anyone's got any anxieties around kind of false self-employment when someone has kind of routine hours, potentially wears the uniform, all that kind of stuff. It's just something that, you know, has been on our radar. Not that we have a self-employed model. Our model is very much an employed model. The self-employed we have tended to historically use for more kind of specialist roles where, if you like, we're kind of sharing the risk a little bit. So if we're setting up a women's health service or a pediatric service, for example, so we've kind of tended to self-employ kind of more specialist roles. But our mainstream MSK therapists, we tend to employ, I think we employ all of them, is how we've tended to go. And I think the reason we've done that from our perspective is really just the amount of front end work that we tend to put in with our team. And if you like, kind of they win in the early days when we're putting an awful lot into them. But then we kind of start to win more as they get better as therapists and progress through the clinic into kind of driving forwards busier diaries. We did initially have a bonus structure system with the way we rolled our kind of salaries for our employed staff, but we found that actually kind of good therapists tend to retain and, you know, build a bit of a referring and returning culture. And actually, you know, whether they got a bonus or whether it was laid out as a kind of standard salary didn't make too much difference to them. But what we did find is at the front end, a bonus system for an employed member of staff became a bit of a barrier to entry, because what we found is that at the kind of level of recruitment or at the stage of recruitment, people really only took or only saw the base pay rather than what they could earn as a bonus, because I think, you know, it might be a physio thing, but they seem to be quite risk averse coming in to a private practice. And I think what they wanted to really know was exactly what they were going to get. But certainly doesn't mean that a bonus structure can't work as people go through the clinic and you want to try and remunerate them higher. I think what we've also found historically is that physios have tended to be more happy with an employment model, with an employed model in our area. We're outside London with all our sites, but we have found kind of osteopaths and other professions have been more interested in self-employed models, but we've certainly found that the employed model for us has really helped with the buy-in of clinical training, the whole cultural piece, sharing and, you know, knowledge base and skills, and just the overall culture of the business with that employed model has certainly felt like, you know, people are much more interested in learning from each other, sharing patients, sharing knowledge, and definitely getting involved a lot more in the whole cultural piece of the business. So, you know, that's our perspective, but we're very aware that the climate is slightly different kind of from London to outside of London as well. But they were just the points I wanted to make, really.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I've got some information on IR35 and I'll drop that into the chat later, just conscious of time. But yeah, we've had quite a lot of experience with that, so I'm happy to share. Thank you. Karen, you've got your hand up.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry.
Sorry, you're just dropping out now, Karen.
Traveling. 35. Can you? IR35 is something that we have quite a bit of experience with regards to being the oil industry. And the key bit for us is to make sure that people have alternative income streams and that we have a clear differentiation between the employed and self-employed staff. With regard to employed versus self-employed, we were all self-employed until just before COVID, and then since then are almost all employed. But like Eric, we've had a few people recently who now want to look at being self-employed again. We've had various bonus things structures over the years and found none of them particularly to work. And I don't know if part of that is because physios in general that we have come across aren't that motivated by money. They aren't that motivated to stay busy though either, and that's been a problem for us. But one of the ways we're going down that is to work with Celia Champion on trying to get people on board with the values of clinic and making clinic feel more like theirs, to try and then make them motivated to look after patients and potentially fill their diaries. Maybe a interesting, different way to look at things, but we've really struggled with bonuses over the years.
Thank you, Karen. Amy, you've got a question.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So we were purely self-employed, and then in 2022 we've moved into a fully employed model apart from a few lingering self-employed people. So this is our first foray into employment. We do a base salary and a bonus structure based on once the clinician has met their revenue threshold, then they start earning commission. The revenue threshold set just at their cost to the business, so their salary plus employers NI. I'm now navigating this stage whereby we've got some of our more senior staff who are now going to be supervising more juniors. Sort of did all of it before, which is just a bit crazy. I'm not going to do that anymore. And so now they're not grumbles, but there's just a few little things like, oh, well, you know, I'm going to be seeing less patients, so that's going to affect my bonus structure because I'm going to be filling in an hour a week with this junior physio to, you know, to manage them as they continue professionally. Has anybody experienced this? Do you feel that those management hours are just factored into the base? Or do you feel that that should be acknowledged, that they're going to be doing more kind of administrative hours on top of what they were previously doing, and I should therefore change the threshold? Any additional advice or thoughts on this? Very welcome.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on the quantum, Amy. I mean, an hour or so, maybe not a huge amount, but certainly for us, if they're doing, you know, several management hours a week, we pay that separately, and yeah, it's basically, you know, it's a management salary as part of their component, a management component that's part of their salary.
And like just a sort of like an hourly fee for the management, or completely separate structure?
It's completely separate. I mean, because I guess the way that we look at it is, or the way the individual will look at it is, you know, if they had all the hours in the diary and they were seeing patients, they'd be earning X. They don't want to be worse off for doing some management time for you. So you kind of need to look at what they could earn and then make an informed decision about what you want or what you can afford to pay them for that management time.
Yeah.
We do that too, and then meet somewhere in the middle.
Okay. Yeah. And so Tash, you just offer them an uplift as a result of that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, or whatever they would have earned in that time, as Simon said, we'll match a number near that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But ad hoc.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Because there's a certain amount of admin required anyway, so I just didn't know if I was just being too generous. Like, for heaven's sakes, guys, you're an employee. I'm giving you a healthy base. This is just part of your job, so it's quite hard to navigate exactly where we're going. But yeah, thanks very much.
And the bonus side of things for employees, we've done it for years, and certainly since COVID, hardly anybody's achieved it. But whenever they did achieve them, it was always the same people. So it's like 3 people in the business, and no one else ever did it because they just were quite happy doing what they did.
Helen, you got another question?
Yeah, I think it's probably just, is it a comment or a question? We've had various models over the years. I've employed staff and I've self-employed, and I actually actively went away from employing when our last employee left into self-employed, just because it fitted with our demographic and in terms of what the clinicians want. And we've got a really nice, happy team of self-employed people at the moment, and I would probably carry on with that for the time being, should it be that suddenly we've come a bit more of a across, whereas people were coming to us to, you know, I wasn't actively recruiting, people were just coming to us to ask, you know, I'm moving to the area, can I work with you? And the self-employed worked, so we went with that, because I quite like the idea of being able to reward exactly all the stuff that they were saying, Penny was saying about why people want to be self-employed. But I've now come to a bit of a standstill, thinking, do I look at employing somebody again with a bit more wisdom? And I guess my question would be, how other clinic owners actually broach back into it, because it's a big commitment, isn't it? If we are going to put up a baseline salary that's attractive, it's going to attract the right sort of person that you want to come and work for you, how you are ballsy enough to grow that, and go in at an employed salary. Does that make a bit of sense, what I just said?
Yeah, it does. It kind of depends on your local market. Helen, I would say that right now in London, it is, demand is high, and so actually the limiting factor to growth is your ability to get clinical hours in the diary.
Agreed.
So
yeah.
So on that basis, the cost of you not having those hours in the diary is going to be far greater than the salary that you're going to commit to that person on an annualized basis. Would be a statement I would make, certainly in London. So, you know, in the past it's probably not always been that case, but at the moment, you know, you are getting those hours in the diary. There was a commitment for that. It is financial, but that is giving you the runway to grow. So, I mean, again, it's going to be an individual situation, but I think, you know, you got to ask yourself the question: can I afford not to have those hours in the diary?
Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's also taking the view that, you know, it is going to take a little bit of time, so it might cost you in the early days, but if you've got the right person and the right infrastructure in place to get them good, then, you know, it's going to be worth it in the long term for you if you are going to make more money from your employed therapist than you will your self-employed, which you may well do because you're offering more job security to them and all the add-ons.
I think I've just had my fingers burnt a bit in terms of having put all that effort in with employed staff, and you know, doing a pretty good job of it, but they still left. You know, they keep in contact with me and continue to thank me for the career development, but you know, that's the key. But I guess I'm also learning the importance of hire slow, fire fast, and making sure that I have those conversations about what people realistically want. Our area where we are based is not a particularly attractive area for people to move to. They tend to move this area because of partners' work more than the attractiveness of the area. So it's quite hard. Yeah, people will come and they'll move for a job, which we've had before, and then actually realise it's the area that they don't like. So it's digging into that, isn't it? That's hard.
Absolutely.
Just to add to that, I've had my fingers burnt as well a few times, but in the last few years, I find just being really honest with them from the outset about how much it costs to employ somebody. And so as a young physio, I didn't want that conversation. I didn't feel that was right, but I just have it now, and I'm really open with them about that, about how much it costs to have them, and what these targets for how many patients you see isn't about how much money I can make in the sun lounges I'm sitting on. It's about trying to give you a secure job and keep everybody else happening. And people buy into that when I'm honest with them, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you. Probably got time for one, possibly two more questions if there are any. Conscious of we're nearly at the hour mark. Been some great discussion today. But if there's anything else, please.
You may have discussed this at the beginning, but in terms of staff benefits, over and above cycle to work schemes and private health insurance, is anyone else offering anything cool or fun, or that's something that the staff really loved?
Like a gym,
Sorry
like
if you
a
went
gym
over this at
membership.
the beginning.
Like a gym
No,
membership.
anything like that. Yeah. Yeah, anything like that. Yeah.
We have a fun fund, which means they can anybody in the team can apply for money to have a sort of night out within one group, but there needs to be a minimum of 4 of them, and they tend to enjoy doing that. They'll go out and do something or get coffees in that day or a lunch, and that seems to work really well, because you can what can you give employees, Penny? Is £150 a year pre-tax? Anyway,
I don't know actually what the cut-off is.
Yeah, you can spend.
Tash, I think it's only 50.
Is it 50?
I think it's only 50.
No wonder I'm broke. But they enjoy the fun fund, and they can choose what they do with it. But nights out are always good. I'm sure you do that.
Yeah, and I know that Pure Sports Medicine offer health insurance. Sorry, I see it's 150. Is anyone else offering health insurance for their staff?
We do, but they pay for it, but it's at a reduced rate because it's a company policy.
Yeah, same.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we recently.
Who are you with, Tash? And
we're with Vitality at the moment,
Mm.
even though I hate them as a physio
Yeah.
but they're reasonable for everything else.
The benefits with Vitality that we found is the add-on. So they can get half price off sports shoes, free cinema tickets, free Apple Watches, all this kind of stuff, which can help.
Reduced gym membership. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good.
yeah, Virgin, yeah.
As
Nothing, yeah.
It's Vitality is a brilliant health insurance for having a cup of coffee and a cinema ticket free every week. It's shit if you actually want some medicine.
Well, actually, I've used it. It's been good. It's not good for accessing physio, but then hopefully we can all help each other out on that front.
What else? Yeah, we have a sliding scale of payment for courses. So if there's a course or that somebody wants to do and you're self-employed and you're only with us part-time. So we've had one guy who's just done 2 parts of an ACL course, one in Saudi Arabia and one in Dublin. And he's with Spurs and the Royal Ballet when he's not with us. So he gets a sliding proportion to how many hours he does for us. And so that's very clear and transparent to everyone. So the employed full-time get more than the self-employed part-time, and that's all very clear, but they know they'll get a bit. So that's quite helpful. And we've got a big gym, so they get free membership, doesn't cost us a penny.
Thanks, Lucy. Helen, did you have another question, or was that a hand up from previously? That's fine. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and just a special thank you to Penny for making some time today to come and present with some very, very interesting information. So thanks, Penny, for that. And thank you, everyone, for a lively and interesting conversation today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you.